Professors and teachers, what's the most pretentious thing you've heard a student say? You know, students, don't get too big of a head and start shooting your mouth off thinking that you're hot crap, because someone is inevitably going to make you look like a ding-dong. Usually that person is you. Story 1. All the same student. My dad said I don't have the personality to be a nurse. I need to be a doctor. I don't have time to join any student organizations. I'm married. I'm going to make all A's this semester. Oh, that academic warning? I took care of that. She had a mediocre GPA, hadn't made good grades in science and math classes. Unless her dad built the medical school, she wasn't getting in. And that academic warning was totally legit. I spoke with her professor and he laughed for quite a while when I told him that she said she would make an A. He said she might pass with a C- if she was lucky. The kicker? Her husband then called our office and threatened to get us all fired for daring to tell his precious wife something she didn't want to hear. Gave us a deadline to apologize to her before he called the president of the university to file his complaint about our behavior. Looked him up on Facebook. One of many TAs, is an excellent Facebook stalker. One of my TAs, and he works at a local bike shop. Not even a student at our university. We turned the voicemail over to campus police, and they had a chat with him. Update. After 2 changes of major and 3 or 4 changes of pre-health designation, pre-med, pre-dent, pre-PA, whatever else, the student finally graduated. She's going to go to the local community college in the fall and start their respiratory therapy program. If she found her passion, then I'm happy for her. My dad said I don't have the personality to be a nurse. I need to be a doctor. Well, that one may have been her dad saying she's got a crappy personality and her not realizing it because she's not all that bright. The rest, holy crap. I just can't get over the husband calling and being like, "How dare you speak to my precious Puddum like that? You shall treat her with the utmost respect. I demand an apology before the sun sets this afternoon, or we shall do pistols at dawn." Story 2. Well, I'm not a teacher, but I was a student. My English teacher in grade 10 once took me aside after a class in which I had been an unbearable little crap and said to me, "Do you know what precocious means?" Eager to show off my superior command of the language, I replied, "Of course, it means demonstrating extraordinary abilities at a young age." I was so god-dang proud of myself having learnt the word just a few days earlier. His reaction was, I felt, a little strange. He looked at me with such contempt, unable to stop his face from flashing genuine disgust, and he dismissed me. We never spoke about it again. Years later, maybe a decade on, I remembered that conversation and wondered about his reaction. Why disgust, and why so visceral? Suddenly it hit me like a fricking freight train. I had misheard his question. He hadn't asked me if I knew what precocious meant. He asked me if I knew what pretentious meant. And I'd given him the most completely and utterly pretentious answer it is possible to give. It couldn't have been a more pretentious answer if I'd been wearing a beret. I mean, I feel like the teacher should have at least had something further to say instead of just looking at you with that kind of look, but that does make for a pretty great story. And you seem to be self-aware enough that I don't think you are probably that pretentious. Story 3. As an LMS admin, I hear all kinds of crazy stuff during grade appeals. Last semester, a couple of kids on a sports team were cheating in a class. Each of the 5 would take turns taking the test, first online and then in succession, so that while one may not get a great score, the rest usually did. So the instructor asks how to resolve the issue. We make the 30-question test randomized from 100-question pools. Immediately following the next test, we have a meeting with the dean. Apparently, the students felt it was unfair. Nothing happened to us or them, but the fact that they actually filed a complaint because the test couldn't be cheated on amazed me. At least they understood teamwork. Story 4. My first year teaching, I subbed in a grade 10 English class. It was September, and one of the girls in the class was heavily pregnant, so would have gotten pregnant in grade 9. All they had to do in this period was write one page about themselves. Easy sub-lesson. So I'm walking around checking work, and this girl and her group have done crap all. So I pop over to them and remind them they only have 20 minutes left and need to get something written on their page. Without a pause, the girl looked up at me and said, "Ms., Jesus didn't write his own Bible, now did he?" I just walked away. Oh, my dear, no. No. I don't think that you want to say that, because if you're a follower, if you're a Christian, that's a pretty pompous thing to be equating yourself to. I know they say to try and act Christ-like, but you might be taking it a little far there. Story 5. As a high school English teacher, I was counseling a freshman student, about 14 years old, that she should probably do some of her coursework. After all, she wouldn't want to come to her senses as a junior or senior and realize that she was a year or two behind in credits and wouldn't be able to graduate. Her response? "Why should I listen to you? You make about as much as a garbage man." Lots of laughing, giving high fives to friends in class, plenty of other students to focus on in class. I just moved on to help others in class. Tough to convince a 14-year-old to think ahead. Just checked her transcript. She's about a year and a half behind in credits. It's going to be very difficult for her to graduate this year. Wow, it would take all my self-control not to respond, "Yeah, and the trash they deal with doesn't talk back." Oh, this is one of the reasons why I don't think I could have been a teacher. Because if I had kids like this, who are just like, "Why should I listen to you? You make as much as a garbage man." I would keep an eye on those students. I would wait for them to graduate. And if I found out that they got stuck working some just crummy little dead-end job, I would be a regular customer. And I would never say anything, but I would always just smirk. And that's not healthy for either of us. That's not a good thing for a teacher to do, but I probably would. Story 6. Not personally, but while I was student teaching in a wealthy area, another teacher told me he heard a student say that their parents got them a crappy car, but it was just until they totaled it. Then, after they destroyed it and learned their lesson, they'd get a Ferrari. I don't understand how this would teach them a lesson. Crash your car faster so you get a new one, and possibly be injured and/or die in the process. Story 7. From a senior who can barely read or write after I told him he needed to check his essay for spelling and grammar errors. "Whatever, man, I'm going to come back here in 5 years and make way more than you." I said, considering I'm a public school teacher, I certainly hope that he'll make more than me. I'm going to be a rapper. Story 8. This is from a 16-year-old student arguing about the grade she earned on a research paper. My essay doesn't need any citations because my opinions are fact. Holy frick. The teachers I had in school would have absolutely laughed in my face if I had said that to them, or anything remotely near that. Story 9. I gave a student a C on a philosophy paper, and she said to me, "Do you know who my father is?" To this day, I have no idea, but the grade didn't change. My father, the inventor of toaster strudel, will not be pleased to hear about this. Story 10. Next year, you're still going to be here BSing, and I'm going to be making it big in the real world. He got held back. He's not in my class this year. So many people underestimate the real world's ability to destroy even the most passionate, driven, and talented human beings. To all of you who are currently in middle school, high school, whatever, and you think like, "Man, I got this thing down packed. The real world, I'm going to be ruling that roost." No, the real world is not fun. I mean, it's fun. It's not the worst thing in the world. I don't want to pretend like it's hell or something like that, but it's not as nice as you might think. And boy, oh boy, if you think you're big crap in high school, you're just a little turd in the real world. Story 11. I deserve an A for this course because I was a model student. I've heard some whoppers, but this one came from a student who completed, I think, 2 of the 5 required papers, and both were crap. Missed half of the classes, was 15 plus minutes late every time he did show up, never participated in discussions, and didn't turn in a single homework assignment. To this day, the lack of self-awareness boggles my mind. That level of delusion is almost impressive. Story 12. Middle school teacher. I'm only taking Spanish so I can tell my housekeeper what she needs to do. Fails high school Spanish, becomes house cleaner to pay bills, learns perfect Spanish from talking to coworkers. Story 13. My wife teaches a performance class. You literally show up to practice for the performances and that's your grade. She understands athletics, family emergencies, etc. She had a student come in at the end of the semester and whine about the grade he got, a D, I think. The kicker, he flat out told her the reason he missed so much was because he was napping. He was lucky he got the grade he did. Story 14. 4th grader. I don't need to do well in school. I can go to any college I want because my parents are rich. Story 15. Do you know who my father is? His dad was the head of the school board. No fricks were given that day. I've also had a kid say, "Didn't you wear that outfit last week?" This was a very wealthy school. If his father is the head of the school board, and I knew that, and he said to me, "Do you know who my father is?" My response would be, "Yeah, and that makes your terrible performance all the worse. I can't wait to tell him about it." And to the folks like, "Didn't you wear that outfit last week?" I have like a rotation of maybe like 12 outfits that I go through. I do not have a ton of outfits because I like the ones I have. And I can't wear like 2/3 of them on camera because they all have green. So you all get to see like 5 outfits from now on, unless I buy some new shirts, I guess. God. Story 16. First-year grad student stayed after day 1 to tell me, "Just so you know, I'm going to be very bored in your class, but it's not your fault. I just already know everything you're going to talk about." She completed the course with a D-, failed both of her other classes, lost her funding, and now works at Panda Express. Story 17. From a 20-year-old undergrad, "I'm going to be an accountant. I'll never need this database stuff." Well, to be fair, they probably won't. They'll learn all about the superior power of SQL databases and all they can do with them in the modern world. Then they'll join a practice and use the same Excel documents with archaic VBA macros that have been used for decades because getting accountants to adopt new technologies is like flogging a dead horse. Story 18. Not from a student, but from the student's parent. "He doesn't need to do math because he's a prophet. Prophets don't do math. Would you make Jesus do math?" Jesus was a carpenter. He knew his math. How would a teacher handle this? Like, I'm curious if any of you watching this are a teacher and a parent said, "My kid doesn't need to do math. My kid's a prophet." Like, how do you actually approach that? Because I wouldn't know where to begin. I would just shake my head and walk away. I wouldn't be able to handle that level of delusion, let's say. Story 19. My mom pays your salary, so give me an A. I feel like a proper response to this could be, yes, your mom contributes a very tiny fraction to my salary, therefore you shall receive an appropriately tiny fraction of an A. Story 20. I'm a 4.0 student on the dean's list, so academic misconduct won't be a problem for me. I'm going to be super wary of all this guy's papers. Like, sure, people cheat out of desperation, but desperation takes 2 forms. Desperate to not fail and desperate to get the A and not the A-. Story 21. Notre Dame has required theology classes in the first year of studies. My professor was a pretty laid-back guy, so one day we were discussing the Tower of Babel. Humans all speak the same language and get tons of stuff done. They decide to build a tower to heaven. God doesn't like that, so he makes humans speak different languages so they can't communicate or build further. The professor asks why God would do something like that, and one student raised his hand and said, "Well, pretentious huff, it's not for us to question God." The professor gave him a bemused look and replied, "Yes, it is. We're in a theology class." It was a fun class. This makes me want to take a theology class. Story 22. I went on a date with a professor at Stanford who had a student raise their hand to ask if he was qualified to teach the course, most likely because he had a Southern accent. I doubt they asked him what he taught at Georgia Tech. I feel like if you go to Stanford or GT, you really shouldn't have to worry about whether someone is qualified to teach the class or not. I mean, I'd have an easy response for this one if I was a professor. If a student was just like, "Are you even qualified to teach this course?" I would go, "Well, that's a great point. I'm going to email the dean with your name and that criticism of his or her hiring process. We'll see what the university thinks about you thinking that they're not smart enough to know how to hire actual professors." Story 23. A student asked me why I was a professor, followed by, "Because from what I understand, those who can't do teach. That explains why you're trying to teach me about success." Story 24. I'm a high school art teacher. I was talking about art influences, and a kid said, "I am not influenced by anyone. The only art I like is my own." Okay, kid. Story 25. It's a private Catholic school, but not the safest/best around. I was suggesting to a student to stop wearing their watch because it might be stolen. But this is just my everyday Rolex. Story 26. Student turned in his final paper, and instead of responding to one of the prompts, he wrote his paper on how much he hated the class and how terrible we were as teaching staff. I gave him a B because, while he didn't answer a prompt, he backed his claim up with evidence, which is well above average work compared to his classmates. Story 27. Third-year history student here. A girl in my advanced research tutorial said her reaction to reading Anne Frank's diary was just a bit like, "Get over it, princess," and described her as a prissy, angsty teenager. I guess I'd be pretty angsty too if I couldn't talk to any of the cute boys, and also they were Nazis. Story 28. I once overheard a student in the college-level science major specific class that I teach say, "I wonder if this teacher will be able to tell me something I don't already know." And apparently I did because he failed the class with a 32%. Apparently he didn't know what he didn't know. Boy, that kid's got some big balls for such poor performance. I didn't think that through very well, but hey, neither did he. Story 29. I don't really need to learn this kind of basic accounting. I'm definitely going to get a job at Goldman Sachs. To me, his TA. Spoiler, based on his grades, this kid was definitely not getting a job there. Story 30. Student. I don't deserve an F, you friggin' prick. Professor. I know, but it's as low as I can give you. Man, he opened the door and your dad just strolled right in. Story 31. We're the only students who have a chance of passing the AP exam, so you should just focus on us. She was referring to herself and 3 other classmates. She was also loud enough for the entire class to hear. Story 32. When I used to teach first grade, we had our school-wide open house in the second week of school, so we're maybe 7 or 8 days into the year. I had a parent come up to me and ask, "So how is daughter doing academically compared to everyone else here? She'll be going to an Ivy League school, so she needs to be the best student in your class." I told her that we were less than 2 weeks in and that I don't rank students for first grade. The mom was a thorn in my side for the rest of the year. Parents, you need to chill out. Oh my gosh, I know you want your kid to succeed, but when you do crap like that, you are setting them up for failure. Maybe not academic failure, but they're setting them up for some kind of failure. Maybe a failure in your relationship with them. Don't push them so hard. I mean, it's first grade. Story 33. I'm a student, but our teacher once gave us the whole, if you're not going to be respectful, if you think you already know the material, then just leave. A kid stands up, walks over to the door, realizes that everybody is staring at him, thinks about going to sit back down, but decides on just leaving. The teacher actually let him leave for like 15 minutes before going to get him. This was middle school, so he couldn't leave campus. I already got up. Story 34. I'm a princess. I'm a preschool teacher. Then I guess it's too bad that the empire has been abolished and the ground is littered with the heads of the bourgeoisie. Story 35. If my son gets a B in your class, we'll have to settle for Georgetown. Well, boo frickin' who. Story 36. I came here to learn, not to think. Story 37. Your dad's house only cost $500,000, so he lives in the slums? Story 38. Rising senior walked into my college prep company, took a practice ACT, scored in the single digits, informed us that Georgetown is his safety school, then left on a 2-month vacation. I didn't even know you could get single digits on the ACTs. I mean, it makes sense, this grading scale. I don't remember what it goes up to. I got a 32 or 33. I don't remember, but I did pretty well. It got me offers from a few colleges, and then I went to my community college right out of high school and dropped out after a month and a half. It's good times. I made good decisions. Story 39. I guess this kid never grew out of his 8th grader syndrome, but he keeps showing up to class in a lab coat, shouting things about conspiracies and pretending to be talking on his flip phone. It must be an honor teaching Hyoin Kyoma. Son of a bee. Story 40. I was teaching a basic math class to a group of emotionally disturbed students, and we were reviewing the metric system. I reviewed the material and reiterated that a kilo is 2.2 pounds. Suddenly, a voice from the back of the room pipes up and says, "Frick, I got ripped off." Not pretentious, but hilarious. Story 41. A lecturer at the Natural History Museum told me that the Egyptians invented most of science and white people stole the ideas from them, in response to a tangential reference to Kelvin and thermodynamics. After a few more examples of conspiracy theorist history, I asked the student what museum lectures they were talking about. Turns out you can get a bunch of people to meet you at a museum, tell them horse crap, and they'll believe you because you're standing in a museum. Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.